Welcome to the Miami Jewish Film Festival, the world's largest festival of its kind. We want to thank all of our members, sponsors, community partners, and all of you film lovers, and especially our presenting sponsors, the Center for the Advancement of Jewish Education and the Greater Miami Jewish Federation, for their continued support throughout all of these years. My name is Rabbi Dr. Leon Weisberg. I'm the Holocaust Educational Consultant of the Manya and Max Nudell Holocaust Learning Center at the Posnack JCC in Davie, Florida. And I'm excited to be moderating a virtual conversation with director Gary Hochman from the movie Deadly Deception at Sobibor, which is premiering this year at the festival, which you all have had the pleasure and the opportunity of viewing prior to this discussion. So thank you all for joining us and for being a part of our conversation. A very special thank you to the director, Gary Hochman, from the movie Deadly Deception at Sobibor for joining us.
Hi, thanks for watching.
And the movie, I'm sure, has had an impact on many of you, and you're probably thinking about trying to process what the movie had. And part of this Q&A is to help you process that. And hopefully I'll raise some questions that you may have been thinking about yourselves. First off, Gary, I found your opening question and your closing statements powerful beginning and endings, like tremendous parenthetical statements that here it starts and here it ends. You begin with an imposing question. What if the Nazis erased all traces of the Holocaust? Then you tell us that that's what they tried to do at Sobibor. And are there other examples, or did you research anything else? Did you find where there was an attempt to erase the evidence of mass executions?
Well, I think there are a lot of examples from Father Dubois, who has written books called Holocaust by Bullets, which has to do with executions that took place in forests. But this is one of 3 Action Reinhardt death camps. These were camps that were set up only for extermination, and they were set up in secret and in relatively secret locations. In this case, Sobibor was deep in the woods. And while I posed the question of what would happen if they hid the Holocaust, the fact of the matter is that this is an example of the beginnings of Holocaust denial and distortion. And that's a driving force for having done this whole project. So to the best of my knowledge, there's been no other type of research like this that's been done on this scale. There have been some very small excavations at Treblinka, and I think Auschwitz is going to start doing an excavation as well, in part maybe because of the work that we did, and the director of Auschwitz came out to visit us while we were doing our work. But by and large, there is nothing that has taken place over a decade period to try and unearth the evidence of the heinous crimes that were committed in this part of Poland.
Very much, you're right on target. You're right. Treblinka was another example where they leveled everything and actually brought in some farmers and set up a farmhouse to make it look like there was a farm in Treblinka in 43. Similarly, Chelmno was completely destroyed, and there's nothing there. Of course, now there's memorials, but there was nothing there afterwards. I believe there was also an investigation in Majdanek of the people that were in Field 3 who buried all their jewelry in the ground, and they did that. So slowly we find that and I think your movie was a catalyst, particularly for the Auschwitz story, because I read that also Auschwitz wants to begin some excavations, particularly around the barracks, and see what was there. So you really did a very, very important piece. Let me ask you this. Was the juxtaposition in the film of the forest, the train sound, and the shofar, was that your idea? I mean, putting those 3 things together, I found very, very moving. Hearing the shofar sound, hearing the train go while they're in the forest, kind of exploring.
Well, I don't think it's a shofar. I think what you're hearing is the train whistle.
It sounds like a shofar.
It may sound like it, and that is, I mean, the juxtaposition of having this sound, which we heard on a regular basis, because this area had been a logging industry site before the war. It still is to this day. As a matter of fact, they use the same tracks, and they use empty hopper cars like you would have for coal or wood that are empty and then are loaded up with logs and taken away, which you see in the film.
Which is film from.
But the sound that you hear is the sound that we heard, and it was repeated any number of times during the week when a train would come through. And for me, it was always a chilling sound.
I was just going to use that word. It was a
always
chilling sound.
Always a reminder of what we're doing here is finding evidence that the Nazis tried to hide.
All right, and that was powerful. Again, thank you for the clarification. I really, and maybe it's me, I heard a shofar, I heard that, but obviously that's because that's what I'm thinking. Let me ask you this. How did you connect with Yoram Jaime, the archaeologist for this film? How did you two get together?
Well, it's an odd story. A Jewish historian, a rabbi, and an archaeologist invited me to meet them.
Sounds like the beginning of a joke.
It sounds like a bad joke, but it's absolutely the truth. And in this case, the rabbi, the Jewish historian, and the archaeologist were one guy. His name was Richard Freund. And Richard had been a colleague of mine in Nebraska. I was at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He was at the University of Nebraska-Omaha. We started to do work together, first in Israel. And my parents lived in near Springfield, Massachusetts. And I was flying home, and as I would do normally, I would give Richard a call, and I'd say, I'm going to be in town. I'll come out and visit you sometime during the week. And he said, I need to see you right away. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. I can come see you in a couple of days. I just can't see you today. He says, I'll meet you at the airport. So I met him at the airport, and he says, hi. I say, hi. And he says, what do you know about Sobibor? And I knew the story. I know the basic story I knew the basic story at that time, but I didn't know why he was asking me. And he told me that he had met Yoram Jaime in Israel, and that I had met him previously during a trip that we had worked together. Richard and the geophysics crew and I had worked together in Israel and elsewhere. And during one of our trips, we had come across Yoram on a road someplace in southern Israel. And he told me that Yoram was planning to excavate. And I said, excavate what? And he said, he's going to excavate Sobibor because he lost 3 relatives there. Right. And I said, what remains there? And he said, it's a forest. And I said, no, I mean, if you're going to excavate, are there some kind of ruins that were there? Are there traces of foundations? And he said, no, just a forest. And at that point, I realized that what he was really talking about was an example of Holocaust denial. And because it's perpetrated by the Nazis, all the more important to think about how do you want to preserve this information. And because I'm a documentary filmmaker and a journalist, and we had worked together before, he was really asking me, did I want to take this on? And I said, well, when would this happen? And he said, in about 3 weeks. And I was a little
let me check my schedule.
Yeah, that's a big thing to take on. And but this was the survey, and I went on the survey, and once I saw the site and I realized how to be, I went all in. I said, okay, if you don't document this, what would happen is the scientists would do their work. They would extract artifacts and features from the site. The artifacts would be removed, which means that there would be no record of them in the ground still. And I thought that should be documented in case anybody decided they wanted to challenge what actually happened at Sobibor in the future.
And that's such an important thing because, as you said, that this is all part of Holocaust denial. Because they right away say, "Well, do you have proof? Do you have proof?" And of course, your documentary is clearly one of those now definitely documented historical proofs. As we look at this, I found that the survivor Philip Bialowitz, a fascinating individual. He tells a very riveting account. Did he want to do this from the get-go, or did you have to convince him, or was it difficult, directing him and moving him in certain things? What were some of the challenges you had with a survivor?
It's not so much a challenge with him. I got in touch with him. I knew he had written a book and that he was planning to go to Poland, and it was coinciding with Yom Kippur,
Right.
and following that with Sukkot. So I flew out to Warsaw. I met him at Yom Kippur services, and he and his son were planning to go to a series of locations, including Sobibor. And I had asked him if I could tag along and document what was happening with his return to Poland. And he came to Poland fairly regularly when he was at that time. He has since passed. And I think that the real challenge with documenting the Holocaust is that so much of Holocaust testimony is based on a survivor's memory. And it depends on when you're asking the questions. So if we had the opportunity to have asked in the 1940s or 1950s, soon after these things took place, the memories would be
Fresher.
Might be different. They'd be fresher. But with time, the challenge, and I would never suggest that you don't believe something that a survivor says, because they experienced it. There's nobody better to state the evidence that they experienced. The challenge that happens at a place like Sobibor is that what the survivors at Sobibor knew and what happened at Sobibor were sometimes different things. And by that, I mean that all of the survivors were from camps 1 and 2, closest to the railroad tracks. And the killing center was camp 3, which was separated by double fences, and the fencing was woven with brush from fir trees and other types of vegetation, so that you can't see out and you can't see in. So that none of the survivors ever saw the gas chambers, or if they did see them, they would have been sent to them. And that means they knew what happened. They absolutely knew what happened in the extermination part of the portions of the camp. Nobody survived camp 3. So the evidence that you're seeing that comes out of the ground is what I would call a new form of testimony. It's nothing that's written. These are articles, these are objects that have been found that help tell a story of what happened in Sobibor at specific places. So a group of keys that were dropped in the forest, and we found 1, 2, 3, 4 during the very first excavation. And it was, what was this, to lock the gas chambers, or to lock a barracks? What was it for? And then when you started finding more and more, then the question became, well, there are way too many keys for locking something up. So what are they? And it took them time for it to register that these were keys that survivors held onto, believing they were going back after a shower. So this is a huge deception, and there are many levels of deception at Sobibor. So these are,
Yeah, I think
it's not so much the survivor's testimony, it's the testimony of those people, the testimony of those who have no voice.
Right, the items themselves, exactly right. You mentioned Francois Dubois, and he had the same thing when he started investigating these pits, which were, of course, beautiful meadows, beautiful, when you look at them. And he took a metal detector and went over, and the metal detector was going crazy. So he figured it was because of the bullets. And when they actually excavated, they found keys. They found keys, and that was what was making no sense. And by all the bones, there were keys. And of course, the keys was the thought that they were going back to their homes. So that's a very powerful piece that you put in there. It really is.
But these keys were for luggage.
For luggage.
They're not keys for home. They were small keys, and there were many of them. And again, it's a the type of testimony that the survivors could not give because they wouldn't have known that. I don't think they would have known it.
And when you showed the map of Sobibor, but then questioning that there's a few different variations of the map of Sobibor, and part of it was because nobody really knew what's in Camp 3 and what went on back there.
They knew that there were gas chambers. They didn't know how many
and how it was constructed.
They knew there were graves. They didn't know what it looked like, and that's a challenge for depending solely on survivor testimony. Although the survivor testimony tells you a lot about how the camp functioned, and that's important because they could tell us that Philip told us, for instance, that he was assigned to go to the haircutting barracks at one point, but he went in, so he could go into the barrack and come out, but he couldn't see out of the barrack. So that was to cut women and children's hair, and you have to think what a horrible thing to have to bear through all these years. And I thought it was courageous of Philip to want to talk, and that actually proved to be a challenge at one point, because we went to Sobibor on the anniversary of the revolt and found this group of people there, and they really shouldn't have been there because it was Sukkot, and the rabbi wasn't going to come out and do a ceremony. So we thought we were going to be just with Philip, and he was going to give us testimony at the site, walk through the woods, tell us what happened to him. And then there was this group of people, and then it turned out that this group of people was from Austria, and that they had, there's way more of a story to tell than can be in the film, but they had brought with them the son of a man who had been at Sobibor, and he wasn't just any man at Sobibor. He was one of the people who ran the gas chambers and who was killed during the revolt. And here was this son of the guard and Philip. And I asked Philip, what do you want to do? Do you want to leave and come back tomorrow and we'll do what we were planning to do? And he looked at me for a second and he said, I should talk to him. And at that point, I literally had chills running up and down my spine because I didn't know what his plan was. And I just told my director of photography, start rolling, don't stop. We're running video and audio for whatever happens. We will keep, 8 to 10 feet away so that they have a little bit of privacy. But Philip was mic'd up, and I had a boom mic to mic the other gentleman. And then it really was Philip's intention to get the son of this guard, Valister, to say something about his father that his father didn't know. So it was a different form of testimony, not from a survivor, but from the son of the perpetrator. And I thought
second generation of the perpetrator, right?
That was, for me, that was really powerful. And it was so surprising to me that was his main concern, to be able to talk to this man and to see what he had to say, not to challenge him, not to blame him, because he was a child at the time. So I thought that was a very powerful life lesson, especially for young people today who might not be able to understand the scope of what was happening.
Yeah, that was a powerful scene. Very, very powerful. Another scene that was really, for me personally, engaging was, of course, the story of Carolina Cohn, okay, and the medallion that was found and how you traced it back vis-a-vis the date and looking at all the documents of the transport. I mean, that was incredible research. How long did it take you actually from the time you found the medallion till you were able to determine that it was Carolina Cohn?
I think it was a few months.
Yeah.
At the time that we found the item, it's a triangular pendant on the front. It's high for life, for God. And on the back, it was Mazel Tov, a date in Frankfurt AM on Maine. That's on the river.
Frankfurt on Maine.
That's all we knew. And there was, we had a whole discussion about, well, what is this item? Is it a piece of jewelry? Is it somebody said that maybe it was for the zipper of a talus talus and cover, and all of the other ID tags that we had found had birth dates on them. So it seemed that it would have to do with a birth date. And Yoram had a photo published in the Israeli media, and a few women responded that they had a very similar medallion, a very similar pendant, and that it had their birth date on it, and that they were from Frankfurt. So we eventually got in touch with a genealogist, amateur genealogist, came forward and said he wanted to try and find information that would connect it, because the information at Yad Vashem, well, we didn't know where to look at the time. And when it was determined that this was only given to young women, then the question was, well, how many children were born on that date? And it turned out there were 4 children born on that day. 3 of them were male. So we had the basis for understanding who it might be if we found the right date. And the birth date of Carolina Cohn was that match.
And from that one triangular piece pendant, to be able to come up with a name, I think that's, that's what this work is of the excavation and the archaeological finds. Also in there you found
this case of historians.
Oh yeah, of
historian
course.
at Yad Vashem, and in this case the amateur genealogist.
Mm-hmm.
This is critical to being to put all the pieces together. The scientists couldn't do it alone. The historians couldn't do it alone. Right. But together, we had the opportunity to solve this mystery. And you couldn't solve all of the mysteries. There was another tag that was only numbers. It took 5 years to figure out who that person was. And it was a 70-year-old man from a French Moroccan man who had been living in Marseille.
Wow. So, and what about that wedding ring? The wedding ring that you found,
it doesn't have I don't think it had a name. It
just has inside. That's all, right?
It's
right.
Yeah. It's
I mean, that's again, this is amazing, amazing work. You end the film, Gary. You end the film with your concern about how many people know nothing about the Holocaust. Do you think that this film was an attempt to remedy that?
Well, I don't know that there's a remedy for it other than keep talking about it. And what we came across, we were in Frankfurt with high school students, and it was a reasonably diverse group of people at the school, and it was I believe it was the Anne Frank School in Frankfurt. Oh. So all the more meaningful. And they really didn't know much about the Holocaust, and it turned out there was I think there was 1 or 2 Jewish students at the school, and the other students didn't really know that they were Jewish. So this was an opportunity for them to learn about somebody who is their age, who perished in the Holocaust, from their town. So I do think that there are far too few people in America. I can't speak for what happens in Europe or elsewhere, but here in the United States, the number of young people that know anything more than 6 million Jews were killed, that may be all that they ever learn about the Holocaust. It's a fact or a figure from a test or something like that. But this is an attempt to bring evidence to the forefront and hopefully to allow young people to see this and discuss it, because I think it's eye-opening for them to come to the realization that many of the people who perished in the Holocaust were their age.
And that's very dramatic. We just had in Boca Raton a Student Awareness Day, where we brought together 250 high school students from the various public high schools in the area of Boca and South Palm Beach County. And I was the speaker for that point. And much of what we discovered during the course of the day and the discussion with survivors at various tables is how little these 16 and 15 and 17-year-olds know about the Holocaust. They can come up with the key words, like you just said. They know the word Nazi, they know 6 million. They can even come up, some of them will come up with Auschwitz, the name of the camp. But certainly there's a plethora of no information and misinformation. So that's certainly
And
a very valid point. I
I
appreciate
would like,
me.
I would like nothing more than to be able to bring this to Florida in person to groups of young people. I think that would be
Well, that would be a great idea. I'm
that
going
would
to share
be
that with
that would be the best thing to happen for the future of the project.
yeah, I'm going to share that with the leaders of that program. But Gary, really, any last words? Because you've been fabulous in answering these questions. Do you have any last thoughts you want to share as we come to a close?
Well, I think the driving matter for doing this is, how do we know what we claim to know about anything? And in this case, what we're learning here is what wasn't so obvious, what had to literally be unearthed from the ground. And I think the other thing that matters is that facts and words matter more than ever in a world where social media can turn an opinion into what somebody claims is a fact. And the idea of fake news, which is a term I really hate, especially as a journalist. It's what is news and what is fact and what is falsehood. And that is the essence of what this film is about. This is about a search for facts and understanding.
And that's certainly, I personally think you accomplished that in so many ways, but then it's not fair because I happen to be knowledgeable in the area. But hopefully our audience that participated and saw this film, they can go out and also share the film and share with other people. As and I'm talking to all the audience now, as you go out today at the end of this particular program, please be sure to tell people what you saw. Please be sure to tell people what you heard, and let them know that it's an important thing to begin to teach about the Holocaust, particularly with what's going on in the Middle East today. And I know this is a little bit later than the actual events, but what's going on in the Middle East today and what's going and the backlash here in America of anti-Semitism and in Europe as well of anti-Semitism, I believe has to do with a lack of Holocaust education among so many people that they just don't know what it was all about. I want to thank you, Gary, very much. Gary Hochman, the director of the movie Deadly Deception at Sobibor. And again, thank you to all of our sponsors, all of our members, and those of you that came out to the festival and participate in this movie. Gary, thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure and a delight speaking with you.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity from the Miami Jewish Film Festival, and thank you for your questions.